Okay. So here we go. Coffee machine. Oh, I got to go the other way. Sorry. I got to go the other way. You got that one. All right. Let's shuffle up a little bit. Freezer. Take a look at the spelling. Gefrier. I-E. Right, right. Dishwasher. Spül machine. This one here. D. Here. Okay. Hair. Mm-hmm. All those are masculine. The last three. Refrigerator, also masculine. Kühlschrank. Right, I'll show it to you. Okay. Ironing board. Bügelbrett. Bügelbrett. Microwave. Mikrowelle. Blanket. Mm-hmm. Eisen. Yeah. Pillow. Pot. Top. Sheet. I think it's das. Das Laken is one sheet. Pan. Mm-hmm. Spell for me again. Mm-hmm. Kitchen sink. Okay. How do you spell it? Okay. There you go. That's it. Give me 1 second here. Get our sheet of paper. Everything away, please. Phones, all that stuff. Nothing on your desk, not in your hands, not in your pocket, not in your, thank you. Give me some of that.
Hey Weaver, I've had so much work today.
Everyone's saying
I
that.
had a history test, a German quiz, and an math quiz, and yesterday I had sacrament and
You're gonna do great. Here we go. Everyone ready to go? I'm ready.
Thank you.
Okay, here's the words. Nummer eins. Pillow. Pillow. Nummer zwei. Sheet. Uh-huh. Sheet. Nummer drei. Kitchen sink. Right. Sehr gut. Kitchen sink. Nummer 4. Pot. Pot.
Can you repeat number 2, please?
2 was sheet. 3 was sink, 4 was pot. Nummer 5, pan. Pan. Four was pot, 5 was pan, 6 oven. Oven. Nummer 7, duvet. Duvet. Nummer 8, coffee machine. Or coffee maker. What did it say? I'm sorry, probably kind of give it. I think it says coffee maker out in the Quizlet. Coffee maker. Number 9, stove. Stove, like stovetop. Danke, Lydia. Stove. Nummer 10, iron. The thing that you actually put in your hand and iron. That was number, yes, number 10. Yes, you're right.
And then number 9 is iron bowl.
I haven't said, no, iron was number 10.
Okay, 9 is stove.
9 was stove. Okay. Bonus, ironing board. How'd you guess that? Not that many words I could have guessed. Ironing board. You repeated. 9 was iron. 9 was stove. Hold on one second. And 10 was iron. Okay. Bring up to me, please, when you're done. No talking. Yeah, that's it. Danke schön. Danke, danke, danke. Who has a quiz out still? Anyone? Would you wait till Bryce gets back? Okay. Okay. Can you have that off for me?
Oh, shit, sorry.
Oh,
Sorry,
Done.
it's too big.
Here. That's all right. Oh. Which one I want? Okay. Okay. So I already planned on talking about this. I didn't know you guys were taking a test over World War II, but some of you have a test over World War II. high school. But I was going to talk about this anyway, which is World War II related. So it kind of worked out that yeah, that's an idea.
We were gonna do it last year and never did it.
Wow.
Hey, but did we say last year? Last semester.
Well, she means last year,
Okay, yeah, but that like is like yes.
like academic year. No, semester. You're right. All right, let me fix this here. I want to show you. So, guys, please listen. I know some of you are studying for the test, and I understand that. But towards the end of World War II, the last couple of years, our last year and a half, the Germans were good at propaganda. They were good at putting a message out there that may or may not be true. Okay. Okay, just hold on. So one of the things that the Allies, the United States included, were worried about was what the Germans called, the Germans were developing Wunderwaffen, which just means wonder weapons, like weapons no one's ever thought of before they're working on. So we thought they were, and they were in part working on a nuclear project, but they thought there were things beyond that. And there were some things that they were developing, and there were some things that kind of back up their words that made the Allies towards the end of the war even more nervous. They were going to unleash some kind of, weapon that we had never seen before and turn the tide of the war. At that time, the war was kind of, D-Day. What's the date of D-Day invasion? Tell me. Anybody? No. Good Lord. 19 what? 44. And the war doesn't end until the middle of 1945. So, okay. The European War, VE Day. That's in May, yeah. Okay. Yes. Guys, please look up here. So here's some of the weapons that they were working on. Some of them are military related, of course, obviously, and not necessarily deadly on their own. But this one here. Look at the screen, please. This was called, dang it, sorry. This is called when you see it, it's called the Silbervogel, which means the silver bird. It was a huge, what we call a suborbital transport plane. You could put hundreds of troops inside this thing, and it actually would travel very quickly because it would travel at a much higher altitude, just below the level that astronauts, today would orbit the Earth at. So they actually had to fly at that height. They're flying shorter distances, less resistance, and they could deliver large numbers of troops to an area within a number of hours, and equipment on this thing. And it would take off and land like a plane, but it was meant for military use. It's kind of cool looking, actually. But this actually was an idea that, the Nazis had this idea back then. I remember when I was younger, when Ronald Reagan was president, and he talked about this in one of his, I think one of his inaugural speeches about the fact, and this is true in my lifetime, as I've been traveling to Europe, to Germany mainly, since the mid 80s. And one thing that hasn't changed about travel to Germany is how long it takes to get there. And so Reagan was proposing to the Boeing and big companies that make planes like this, we should have a suborbital, not goes into space, but goes just on the edge there, and it can get us places faster. So it doesn't take 10 hours to get to Europe, but it only takes, and not going supersonic speed, but instead of that, it takes us just a couple of hours to get there. That was all doable. Anyway, that never has caught on, but this was the idea the Nazis had back in the late 40s to build a big transport plane like this. Here's another picture of it, coming in for a landing, you can see. And it really would have been, it was kind of white here, but the prototypes were all like a stainless steel, so. No, this was never built, actually. No, it was they're working on it, but it was a concept, Yeah, it would have been that's what the Allies were worried about, is that something like this could turn the tide of the war. Like they could all of a sudden land, if they had several of these, they could land, several hundred troops in a vital area and have them fight from there. It would have been pretty bad. This is a picture thing, never happened, but this is them, building it.
They should turn those into like normal planes. Like
Yeah,
that
that's what,
should be our new normal.
that's what I'm saying. Like that's what Reagan was saying in the 80s too. This needs to be sped up. It takes all this time to get overseas. Then they had this idea here, this gigantic. Now look at the size of this guy right here, the normal size guy. Look at this tank here. So it's going to be a really large personnel carrier that's a fully functional and deadly tank at the same time. Huge tank. And so you could have, I think it was 36 troops inside the, just like armed up, ready to go. It would open up, I think it opened the front actually, if I remember right. And the troops would pour out. And so, of course, it's armored and all that. Plus, it can do damage on its own. And like a lot of these projects that they had, they required a lot of fuel. And towards the end of the war, fuel was at a premium for the Germans. So a thing like this, of course, as heavy as it was and as big as it was and all it was carrying, it burned an incredible amount of fuel. So they were able to make it, but it wasn't efficient at all. It cost too much money, and the valuable fuel wasn't worth it. So they did actually have at least one I know they used, but I think it was, in a battle, but that wasn't enough to make a difference. Here's another picture of it from the front with kind of a cutout of a guy here. Can you guys maybe turn your computers off? Not turn them off, but turn the sound off. And you can see there's like kind of a hatch here that would open up, and the troops there's a ramp there they could come out of. There's a huge tank, and there's actually one here in the Deutsches Museum in Munich. There's an actual replica, at least, of the tank. Wish there was a person standing there. You could see how big it is. But here's actually a tank actually being used in battle. One of those tanks. See the guy standing up here on the turret. And look how small this guy looks coming out of the top of the tank up here. It's and these guys standing down here. But it burned like, it got like, 6 gallons to the mile or something like that. So, think about that. Not 6 miles to the gallon, 6 the other way around. All right, look at this plane here. This was the Horten, and it was like a wing. The Allies called it the flying wing, because it's really all it was a V-shaped wing with, no tail wings on it, no, cross tail fins. No, it had the jet engines up here. And the pilot would sit up in I think it was a 2-pilot plane. These were made, but this is a picture of them like flying over London bombing. That never happened though. They never got that far. But if you take a look at this plane here, please. All right, and then look at this plane. That's our plane. Developed in the 90s or 80s and 90s. But look, there's a real similarity, right? Of this V-shaped, just a wing-only type plane. Look at this here. What they developed next is even more similar to this stealth bomber, And then there's another picture of the Horten from behind. Here's a kind of side view. It's kind of cool. You can see how thin it is. And then this is what turned out of most of them, was this right here. Look, it was crashed. They found parts of it. So it is very, And then another company took that design, a company called look at this plane then. I got 3 people looking, maybe 3. Look at this. This is even closer to what we have then. This is the Gotha P6, and the pilot actually had to lay down, and I think the stealth pilots lay down too, flying the plane, because it's such a low profile aircraft. And so,
They have to lay down the whole entire time.
yeah. And see, here's the pilot. You can maybe see. Can you see he's laying down inside there?
Yeah.
This is kind of a cutaway view. Well, but look at this plane here. Here's the pilot's laying down. You can see through the glass. But again, look at this plane. You know?
You lay down in that one or no?
Yeah, I think they lay down in this one. There's one of the stealth that they lay down in. I thought it was the bomber, but I could be wrong. But anyway, and then they came up with this plane here. This is the Me-162 that would be dropped out of another larger, like a bomber, and then it had a rocket engine on the back, and it could be propelled forward. This was a failure. It's very unstable. It's real kind of, short and stocky like that, little tiny wings. They tried to put like a little propeller on the front of it to kind of maybe give it a little more airfoil or lift, Here's a picture of the little propeller on the front of it. Lydia, can you be quiet? That was tried to make it a little more stable, but it never really got stable, even with the rocket engine. But the hope was that they could get close to the, with their target, and then they could drop this thing out of a bigger plane. This is much smaller, much harder to hit, and it could drop like something strategic, some kind of a bomb, and then turn around and come back to the, where they wouldn't be chased. But this really didn't ever work out either. But this would have been effective if it worked, I guess. Something smaller is harder to hit than a large bomber it would have dropped out of. Here's the big thing we were worried about, though, and this actually had some teeth to it because actually did it. So we started getting these aerial shots when bombing missions started going over to Germany from England. They get these aerial shots and they realize up in the north part of Germany that the Germans are developing rockets. And now think about this now. Before this, there were no rocket delivered missiles. Or warheads or weapons. That's a common thing today. Off planes, off ships, off wherever, off drones, but they never before was. And these were doing ground launch missiles. But we were not even involved. Like we didn't have a rocket program, and neither did the British or the French or the Russians. We didn't have that. But the Germans were advanced in this area, and so we were concerned about them not only building a rocket, but with having the capability of a rocket that had a warhead involved in it that they could deliver to a location, and of course it would explode. Like that's what these kind of rockets do. There was both of that going on in the development. They were trying to, on one end, especially the engineers were more interested in building rockets that could maybe someday enable space travel and all that. But the Nazis were interested in how can we use that rocket to, win the war? How can we use it to deliver weapons? So we knew they were doing something with rockets. And so if you look at this rocket here, please. This is the A4. I always like these old rockets because if you ask a kid to draw a picture of a rocket, this is what they draw. They draw this cone-shaped thing with fins on the side, It looks like a rocket you'd buy at a fireworks stand or something. But it actually is, you can see, pretty large rocket with the big scantry here, and you got the people standing up here. But it was all just to get the rocket in the air, and then now let's attach a warhead to it somehow. Let's try to deliver it to. This particular one was never used as a weapon, but it helped them learn about rocket, how a rocket works, and how it can be, delivered and everything like that. Once it takes off, there were a lot of failures. There's actually some footage of them these rockets over and over again going up and coming back down again, crashing. Back to the drawing board, build another one. Here's one. This is the V2 rocket. This is the one that did the most damage to England because eventually, and this is what put the teeth behind it, about the idea of Wunderwaffen, one of the two things, was that they were going to be able to deliver it to England and bomb London or other cities too without any damage to any pilots. If they come over in a plane, we can shoot the planes down maybe before they do too much damage. But with a rocket, though, it's going too fast. You can't shoot it down. You really can't see it. It's going too fast. But this is the V2 rocket, and this was successful, and they were able to deliver this to England. Here in England, you can see this picture here. This is on the outskirts of London. There's a memorial there. That's what they called it. They didn't use the word missile. The first flying bomb of London fell here June 13th, 1944. So this was the first building that was hit by now these were not precision rockets, these were not laser guided rockets. They knew they could do all the calculations based on wind and how far it was. They put enough fuel inside the rocket to get it that far. And so it wouldn't they couldn't land on a certain building or hit somebody in a certain car like we can do today. They would just get it up in the air, deliver it. It would run out of fuel, and then it would hit the ground and explode. And hopefully it would have gone, with the calculations, would have gone as far as they planned on it going. But so it ended up being more kind of a weapon of terror. It couldn't be targeted on a government building or something. It was going to explode wherever it landed. But they could get it in the general area, like to London. That was a pretty big target, of course. And so nobody knew where they were going to land. So it made it kind of a kind of random, scary thing. This here is the V1 rocket. It's kind of cool looking. It's got the rocket on top, got wings. This actually also is in the Deutsches Museum in Munich. And this was before the V2. And they launched, look at this, it's real primitive. They launched these V1 rockets from a ramp. And this ramp was mobile. They did have a permanent ramp, but the bombers would fly, American and British bombers would fly over, and they would bomb these ramps, so they couldn't use them anymore. So they made these ramps mobile then, so they could move them around because they couldn't afford to have them bombed every time they turned around. So here's a V1 rocket, and they would get it ignited, and it would take off on the ramp, and it would head towards here from Germany to somewhere in the UK. I think most all of them were targeted for London. So here they are. They had to load the rocket up onto the ramp. It's all very primitive how they moved it, like on a cart with wheels, but here's look at these videos here. Oh, there goes a rocket. There goes another one. Little short video. Look at this one. Some of these came right back down again, they go up and then they just crash. But it was all experimental to see, okay, if the fins are like this, if they can direct it this way, that way. All right. Here's the damage they did. It really worked.
Hi here, Weaver.
Hi.
Can I get Millie Tuttle with her book?
Millie Tuttle with your books. Thank you. She's coming. You can see they actually did damage. There's a whole neighborhood here that kind of got knocked out by a couple of these. So they were real deadly weapons, although not precise in any way, but they could certainly get them to a city and hit somewhere. Here's the other thing that scared the Americans was the first jet airplane that actually was used in combat, and it's the ME-262. It's kind of a cool looking jet, I think. It was a one-seater jet airplane, but they didn't get it in the air and using it until really late in the war. I think maybe even into late 1944, early 1945. And by the time they were using it, the pilots, their best pilots for the Nazis, had either deserted the military and come and given themselves up to the Allies, or they'd been shot down and killed. So the pilots that were flying these fast airplanes, these new jets, were not even hardly the best pilots. A lot of them were very new pilots, and they put them at the wheel of this, fast, fast plane, as faster than any other plane had been flown before. It's a lot like giving a 16-year-old, a brand new Corvette or something. It's just too much car for it'd be cool, but it's too much car for that young driver. They're gonna. And that's what happened here. A lot of these planes were wrecked. They were shot down because the pilots just weren't experienced enough to fly such a plane. But there's a couple pictures here. Here's one, actually, an older photo of one. This actually is a replica, I think. And this is a much newer replica of the plane. You can see here it's a new photo, too. And it has a German flag on the back of it, a normal German flag. But it was a very viable plane. It worked. One of the problems was was how fast it was. So if any of you drive, you know that it's possible when you're driving at night to what they call it, you overdrive your headlights. You know what I mean? So you're going too fast with your headlights on, that if something came into view of your headlights, it'd be too late. You couldn't stop in time. That's called overdriving. These planes were too fast for shooting something, because if your other planes you're fighting are moving slower, and once you get a chance and you see that other plane, by the time you are close enough to get your target on it and get the gun shooting, you're zipping past that thing. You're going past it before you have a chance to even shoot at it. And this is where the P-51s, which were slower than these planes, but they're also more maneuverable. And what not today so much with long distance guided rockets, but back then, World War I and World War II, and aerial dogfights between planes. The trick was not to be fast. The trick is how fast you can turn, because you're always trying to get behind the person. I mean, people shot each other head on too, but generally you get behind somebody, and if somebody was behind you, you wanted to turn things around and get behind them. So how fast you could turn was more important than how fast you were, like just flying straight forward. So the P-51s could get behind these planes, and when they got close, they could get a shot off at them. And plus, they had to dive at them from above. They had that plan too, to dive straight down at them. Yeah. And they could get them that way, but again, they're moving awfully quick. But that was one shot they had of them. Oh, I got outside of place here. So this is one of the rockets. This is actually this is the V2. No, yeah, V2 rocket. And it's like a cutaway, has all the parts of it. So the Germans were, like I said, we didn't have a rocket program, didn't have a space program in the 40s, but the Germans were working on this. So after the war, we wanted, and so did the Russians, they wanted their part too, but we wanted the best rocket scientists the Germans had. And we had a plan that we carried out, and it was called, I think it was like Operation Paperclip. I don't want to fill your brain with more plans of World War II, but Operation Paperclip was to seek out and find those best German scientists, rocket scientists who worked on these rockets, and bring them back to the United States and help us have our own rocket, and then eventually NASA. And the first director of NASA was Wernher von Braun, who was a former SS officer for the Germans, for the Nazis. Can you believe it? I mean, these were the top guys in the world. And so we got to the moon and got into space with the help of these former Nazi scientists, rocket scientists. Here's the problem, though, a lot of people have with it, is that we pardoned all those people because they had the knowledge that we wanted, and we wanted that from them. But when they were building these rockets, though, they built these rockets in these deep caves, and you can see here who they're using to build the rockets. They use Jewish slave labor, and you can see the people here in the striped uniforms are they're Jewish, and they were treated extremely harshly if they made any kind of mistake or in their work or whatever. And Wernher von Braun was a part of that. I mean, he was in control of everything for the Nazis. Then later he was in control of things of the space program for the US. But you can see here the fact that the SS was using Jewish slave labor. A lot of people, even in the 40s and 50s, had a problem with the fact that we just kind of wiped the slate clean with those people. Oh, you're in the SS. Well, that's okay. You know about rockets. So anyway, had we not done that, though, we probably would have gotten to the moon like 20 or 25 years later than we did. And the Russians were they got their scientists also, and from the Germans. And really, any advancement in early rocket science, even beyond World War II, came from these German scientists who either ended up in Russia or ended up in the United States. But both countries gave them clemency. I mean, they told them, don't worry about your crimes that you committed. Just build rockets for us. So there you go. You see the fins of that rocket back here? Okay. Wunderwaffen. That's the name of the slideshow. Wonder weapons. Not so much. Build a what? Yeah, well, I agree with the plane thing.
Yeah, I like it. But I don't want to like fly.
Oh, I meant like that big transport plane that flies up almost into space.
Oh, that's good.
The first one I showed.
I like the front one.
Yeah, well, we did build that.
Oh,
That's the
You're a lot next week.
that's what became. That's like the stealth bomber.
Your name's Johnson,
What's wrong with your jaw?
I'll have it clipping something up here, and I feel like break something.
Oh, that sounds fun.
So I can't have this going with pain pills. I'm gonna sell them.
Hey guys.
Yeah, I would.
Really? The one I got.
I'm gonna sell them.
There's like, okay, wait, you're that was a best. That's from what's up there. Yeah. That's from the ones that come from. That's just the tight ones that come so I never saw I just saw something.
Hey girls, let's not get close together, please.
Hey, but they're on sale with the people. I'm kidding you. I will never wear them to you. Like, no, I'll get my shirt.
Hey girls, don't leave till the bell rings, please. Don't leave till the bell rings, please.
So, yeah. Was Ben talking about how he wishes how tall he was?
Bye, good luck on your test. Good luck on your history test, Ellis. You'll be fine. I think you sound like to me like you know it. Okay, schönes Wochenende. Tschüss.